Good evening. I'm Gretchen. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm really grateful to be here. And on the way over here, I got here around, it was like 6:30, which is really unusual for me because I'm usually always late. But I don't know, I got here and I was praying and I walked in and I was met by a lot of friendly guys. I was just, it felt good to walk in and just to Alcoholics Anonymous, and wherever I go, I feel like I'm at home. And then we went outside and we prayed, and I thought that was really neat. I'd never done that before. So this is a really good group. I'm grateful to be here. My home group is Central Carolina group in Sanford. We have meetings every day at noon and then at 6 o'clock p.m. every week, every day, except Saturdays. We do not have meetings at 6 o'clock. Sunday's a speaker meeting. I do have a sponsor. I work the steps. My sobriety date is June 24th of 2012. I'm going to tell you in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. And as a child, I was born into an alcoholic home. Both parents drank. My mother's in recovery now. She's been sober, I don't know, for she's a pretty long time. My father, he lives with me, and he's one of those alcoholics that kind of got away with it. He was able to drink, keep a job, somehow keep relationships. He was able to have some manageability, which I was never able to have even from the get-go. And I remember he couldn't quite understand why I couldn't just get up and go to work the next day. He couldn't understand why I just wouldn't come home at night when he could and drink and function. And so he's one of those that still drinks but is somewhat manageable and pretty happy, but drinks regularly. And so I lived with my parents up until first grade. My father was a construction worker, and he was gone all the time, so it was my brother and my mother. And she had lupus, and she was drunk all the time. I never went to school. I never ate. I didn't have clean clothes. My brother and I were very, very close. He took care of me because my mother could not. She was a poor excuse of a mother, basically. And I'm able to say that today. At one time, I would have felt guilty for saying that, or I wouldn't have wanted to say that, but that's just the reality of it. And my father had enough clarity to know that something had to be done. So he called my grandparents, and my grandparents came and got me, and then my mother's parents came and got my brother, and we were separated. And that was very traumatic for me, not leaving my mother, but leaving my brother, because he had been my caretaker for so long. And him and I were very, very close. And right before I left, I remember that's when I took my first swallow of alcohol. I was in first grade, and it was vodka. And the only thing, I remember drinking it, and I remember correlating this. It tasted terrible. It was nasty. And I remember correlating that with how my mother acted. You know, the taste nasty, she acts nasty. It's terrible, she's terrible. So I kind of, at that young age, I remember, and I could not understand why she would drink that. It just blew me away. Why in the world would she drink something that is so nasty? Later on, I realized why. So then I went to live with my grandparents, and life was really good. My grandparents were very, very good people. They did everything they could for me. They put me in gymnastics. I did dance. I excelled in school. I had horses. I lived on a farm. The biggest thing was there was stability. At 5 o'clock, we had dinner. I got up and I went to school every day. Now, that was a huge thing because I remember telling them I wasn't going to go to school. And they were like, hey, yes, hell you are. And I was like, no, I'm not. And they made me go to school. You know, they made me do stuff, whereas my mom didn't make me do anything because she was always drunk. So I remember that day when I thought I wasn't going to go to school. And boundaries were set, rules were set. I was taught morals. I went to church every Sunday. And for a while, life was good. But one thing I do remember as a child is I had fear of abandonment. And whenever my grandparents would take me somewhere, I felt like they'd never come back and get me. Whenever I would go to sleep at night, I would sit and wonder, what if my grandparents die? Who's going to take care of me? Because I had abandonment issues with my mother and my father, and then leaving my brother. And come to find out, I had blocked it out, but my mother had left my brother and myself at a Denny's restaurant and didn't come back to get us. So that I kind of had suppressed, and later on I came to find out that that's probably why I had that fear all my life of abandonment, and that my grandparents were not going to come get me. And these were people that were there 5 minutes early every time. I mean, we went to the doctor, we were 30 minutes early. So why I had that fear was from what had happened as a child. And I never dawned on me to share that. I never shared my feelings. I never shared my fears. I just kept them. I felt like I was the only one that felt that way. And that continued on until high school. And drugs are a part of my story. This is the primary purpose, but I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I have attended the other fellowship, but the other fellowship did not work for me. It is in AA that I have grown spiritually. AA has made me the woman I am today. But drugs are a part of my story, and so I have to share just a little bit generally what that was like. So I started dibbling and dabbling in drugs prior to high school. My father married a woman, and she had a sister. She had a daughter. She was my stepsister, and she would do drugs, and I would do some with her off and on. And then around 9th grade, I just really started getting sucked into that dark lifestyle. I just remember the music. I remember wanting to party. I remember wanting to break all the rules. Rules didn't apply to me. I remember just, if you told me not to do it, I did it. For some reason, I was no longer a rule follower. I wanted to break every rule there was. Rules didn't apply to me. And if you told me not to do it, I did it. And I lived my life like that up until the age of 24 when I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and surrendered. And so I started drinking a lot. I started not hanging out with the friends that I had, hanging out with different friends. I started sneaking out of the house. I would run away from home. I would stay gone for weeks at a time, and not once did I stop and think about my grandparents, who had done everything they could for me. I was selfish and I was self-centered, and I cared about nothing but what I wanted at that moment. And it wasn't until I had a teenage son who did it to me that I really realized, the pain that I put them through. And I look back and I never even thought of it. I was a tornado just running through people's lives, doing whatever I wanted to do. And so my grandparents kept me as long as they could until they just couldn't handle it anymore, because I was stealing from them. I was lying to them. I wasn't coming home. I was skipping school all the time. And so they called my dad. And my dad came and got me, and I moved in with him. And he partied, so what do? We partied together. I ended up quitting school, and continuously the drinking was progressing. I remember at one time, you kind of wanted to drink like everyone else, and I couldn't. And then I remember I was that girl that drank everybody's beer. I was embarrassed of how much I drank, because we'd be sitting in the living room, and I would drink 2 beers to your 1. And so I'd have, and nobody wants people around that drink like 10 beers in an hour or however much. I mean, I drank like hell. And I remember just being embarrassed about that, because I'd be done with my beer and you're still drinking yours. I'm like, let's get another beer. I'm ready. So I remember that. And I remember drinking in the mornings. And I remember thinking, this might be a problem. I remember waking up one morning, and I had started waking up and drinking. I had to get something in me because I was nervous. I was shaking. The anxiety I started to have anxiety until I could get that drink in me. And I remember waking up one morning, and I had a drink beside me. I had put cigarette butts out in, and it was a mixed drink with alcohol in it, and I drank it because I had to get that alcohol in me. I took the cigarette butts out, and I drank the alcohol because I felt like I was going to fly into a million pieces if I didn't get the alcohol in me. And I was not happy unless I had the alcohol in me. I could not even relax. I could not do anything, and that's all I lived for, was that next drink. And I remember if I had a cooler full of beer, it didn't matter what was going on. The world could go to hell, people could die, a tornado could come. It didn't matter if I had my alcohol. Nothing else mattered. And I continued to live like that, and then my grandfather got really, really sick, and he's the man that loved me unconditionally. I could have done anything in this world, and he would have loved me no matter what. He would have been there for me. He would have helped me. And he was having surgery, and instead of going to see him on the day he had surgery, I chose to get drunk. And I stayed drunk for many days and did not show up. And I was that kind of alcoholic that didn't clean up my messes. I knew some people, they say, well, just go now. Just go the next day. I would stay gone so long that people I would come back because they'd just be glad to see me. You know, that I'd stay gone so long that would kind of subside, and they'd just be glad that I was home. And so, and I never really cleaned up messes. I just made one mess after another. And then he ended up passing away about a week later. And that night I was sitting in the living room. I lived with my dad, but I was visiting with my grandparents. And I remember he was saying he was dying. And I also remember thinking, this is terrible. But I remember thinking, I wish he would just shut up so he can go to bed so I can go drink. And this is the man that loved me unconditionally, and I loved more than anything on this earth. And I wish I could change it, but not really. It's made me who I am today. It is what it is. It's where the disease of alcohol took me. And after he passed away, I went to treatment for the first time because I knew this is not the person that I want to be. And I knew that alcohol had me. So I went to treatment, and I stayed the 30 days. I was 19 at the time, but I wasn't like all those other people. I looked for the differences. I was young. I was cute. I hadn't lost anything. I was so young, I never gained anything. I was one of those alcoholics that never lost anything because I never gained anything because I started drinking so young. So I hadn't lost anything. I still had a lot of people in my life. I got like 30 cards. I get a card or two every day from my family. Everybody was so proud of me. And then I got out, and like a couple days later, I smoked some pot because I thought that would be okay. And then the race was on, and I just continued. And to make a story short, I've been to 4 treatment centers. I've been to halfway houses. I've been to jail. I've been to treatment, like I said, 4 times, halfway houses. My final stop, I was at a homeless shelter because I called my grandmother, and I told her that I was coming home from treatment, and she said, no, you're not. And I said, yeah, I am. They're releasing me today. And she says, well, you're not coming here. And that was so hard on her, but it was the best thing for me because I had nowhere to go because I was not cute anymore. I was a problem. I was that drunk that no one wanted to be around because I would get drunk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd fall down. I'd be stupid. I'd get in trouble. I was just no one wanted to be around me. I was not that classy alcoholic you see in the magazines. You know, the real pretty girl with the, she's smoking a cigarette. And I always tried to be that, or that commercial. But I was tacky. I just never went anywhere. I never got out of Harnett County. I ended up these bootleg joints with these guys that I'm like, what the hell? Look at what I'm with. Terrible, terrible people, And I hung around terrible, terrible people because they made me feel better about myself. And, anyway, I go to the homeless shelter, and I meet a man at the homeless shelter. Like, that's the best place to meet a man. And I don't know why. And I had dated some nice guys and some guys that had a little bit of money and were going places. But I date this guy at the homeless shelter, and I don't know why. And out of all the guys that I'd been with, I get pregnant with this one. And mindless to say, he's black. And which is fine, but he's really black. And anyway, I end up getting pregnant, and I'm thinking of all the guys I slept with. Here I am, and he was older. He was like 20 years older than me. And so I continued to drink, and I continued to drug throughout my pregnancy. I found out I was pregnant July 4th, and September 21st, I quit everything. I surrendered, and because I was an intravenous drug user. And every time I would go to do that, I would think this could kill my baby. This could injure my baby, and I would continue to do it. And I had gotten to a point where no matter how much I put in my body, I still felt nasty. I still felt guilty. I still felt disgusting. The alcohol had quit working. And so what do? Because alcohol had been my everything. Alcohol had worked. And it had gotten to a point where it quit working. And there was nothing left to do but to surrender to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had been in and out of AA for a long time. And I went to see my mother. I had not seen my mom ever since my grandparents took me away from her. And I thought if I could just go see my mom, if I could just go see my brother, that would help. So I got on a plane and I went to see my mother. And that was September 21st of 1997. And I went to see her, and I did kind of like her, and we kind of got along, but she didn't like my boyfriend, which was for obvious reasons. Nobody liked him. Anyway, I went to see her. I came back. My grandma had passed away at this time, and this was another factor for me getting sober, is my grandma had passed away, and she left me everything. She left me a house. She left me 60 acres of land. She left me a bank account of money, 2 cars, and something clicked. Am I going to throw all this away, or am I going to get sober and honor my grandparents? Because my grandparents had done so much for me. They had given me so much, and I had shit on them my whole entire life. And when my grandma passed away, I said, I am going to handle this with some integrity. I am going to take care of what they worked their whole life, and they left it to me. I grew up, you didn't stop at the store and get something. Like, she would be appalled if I said, let me stop at the store and buy a bottle of water. I mean, I literally think about that today. She would have rolled over in a grave. Buying water? If you think about it. But they were just so tight with their money. And that was a huge factor in me getting sober, is I did not want to do that to them. I wanted to honor that. And I have to say I did. I have. I have everything they've left me. I've invested it. I have sold a little bit of land, but I've sold it and put it right back into a house that I built. And I think that they would be very, very proud of me. And every night I look out my window, and my grandpa always talks about how he planted these trees for me. And I remember thinking, you planted me some trees? Big deal. Well, he planted me like 30 acres of pine trees that are my retirement. And I look out that window every night, and I thank God at those pine trees that my granddaddy planted for me. And I'm so, so grateful for that. And so I'm pregnant. I surrender to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get with the women and I get a sponsor. And that was huge for me because I was not that girl women wanted to be around. I was catty. I was not a friend to them. I was the center of attention. I had to be the center of attention. If I was there and another woman came, I'd have to go somewhere else so I could be the center of attention. It had to be all about Gretchen. And so I learned not to be the center of attention. I learned to sit down in a meeting and listen, not walk back and forth to the coffee pot, to put some clothes on. My sponsor had to tell me to do that. To, wear some shorts that are ladylike, sit like a lady, act like a lady. I had to be taught all this because when I came into AA, I didn't know any of that. I did not. And so I started working the steps, and I got with a woman, and I did what she told me to do because I was willing. I was willing to do whatever it took to stay sober. And I wanted to be a mother to my son. I did not want my son going through what I went through. And by the grace of God, he has not ever seen me drink or drug. He is 18 years old. He graduates in a month, and he's joining the military. And I'm very, very proud of him. We've had some bumps in the road with him, but he is a teenager, so anyway. I went back to college. I got 2 college degrees. I got married. I formed a relationship with a God of my understanding, and that has been the most important part of my recovery. Because when I came into the rooms, I was still with my son's father, and he was my God. And I always expected men to be my God. I expected men to make things better. I expected them to fix things. I always had these grandiose expectations in relationships. And I'd stayed with my son's father until God took him out of my life because I was very dependent upon him. I had a lot of fear. And so I prayed to God to do for me what I could not do for myself because my sponsor had taught me that. And about 2 weeks later, he went to prison because he continued to drink and drug. And so he went to prison. And my son was around 6 months at this time. So then it was just my son and myself. And honestly, this sounds corny, but I let God be my boyfriend. I put all my energy into God. And I just prayed, and I wrote God letters, and I read different kinds of literature. And I just really, really tried to form a relationship with God because my sponsor taught me, in order to have a relationship, you have to put work in it. And I had grew up in the church and believed in God, but I sort of had this belief that God was for other people, that he was for those ladies that wore dresses and high heel shoes and all that went to church. He was for those people, but he wasn't for me. For some reason, he he wouldn't work for me. And he started working for me. And he started, like, I would see all these God things. Like, I'm working the third step prayer. I'm turning things over. I can't leave this man alone. I pray for God to do for me what I cannot do for myself, and he goes to prison. And then I'm working the amends step. And my grandparents are dead, and those are the two hugest amends that I want to make. And so my sponsor, of course, says you make a living amends. And so wherever somebody needs your help, you make that a living amends. Well, not even 2 or 3 days later, I take this girl, we're in college at the time, I take her to the eye appointment, which I didn't want to do, but AA had taught me to be of service. I said, okay, I'll take you to your eye appointment, which I didn't want to. But now I want to do that stuff, and I don't regret it. Early in recovery, being of service was not easy for me because I was selfish and self-centered. So I took her to her eye appointment, and I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and there's this old guy that is about to drop his wife. He's trying to get her in the wheelchair. And he's trying to get her in the wheelchair, and the wheelchair's moving. And so I hop out, and I get to go help him, and she's bleeding. And they're just so appreciative. And I'm like, thank you, God. You know, thank you for giving me this opportunity to help these two older people. You know, and so every time I see old people, I just try to love on them. If someone's eating by themselves, I'll see if they want to come eat with me. You know, the other day I was buying some produce, and this old man, I bought his produce for him, and he just thought that was the neatest thing. I said, well, I didn't go to church today, so this is my offering for you. So, anyway, I continued to work the steps, and that is where God would show up. Every step I was on, it seemed like God was right there, and he was working with me on the step. And then I got to the meditation step. And I really, really struggled with that. I struggled with sitting still. It was very hard for me to sit. I couldn't even sit still and watch a movie because I had to be up. I had to be doing something. I was constant motion. I couldn't sit still. Today I can sit still. I could sit still for 2 days probably. I'm so lazy. But, you know, just sitting still and listening to God, that took a whole lot of work for me. And today it is key to my spiritual life. It is essential. It is like breathing air, that time that I sit with God, because I truly believe that is when I surrender self and I allow God to work through me. And I just sit still and I breathe out God, I breathe out self, breathe in God, and I just ask him. It kind of reminds me of taking out the trash. You know, all day long I'm at work, I'm hearing negative stuff, I turn on the news, somebody's killing somebody, my kids are crazy, my husband's stupid. You know, I can just sit down and I can just meditate and I can just let God take over. You know, and I can let him clear my thoughts. And that for me, I try to do every day in the morning. At night, not so much because I usually fall asleep before I really can do it like I can in the morning. And it dawned on me the other day that I used to spend like 2 hours getting ready to go to work. You know, hair had to be perfect, eye makeup, everything. You know, I spend more time on the inside than the outside. You know, it's all about working on the inside and sitting still and getting with God. And so, anyway, I get married. I have several kids. I have 3 kids now. I end up becoming a school teacher. And my marriage goes to hell because I got sober. But and I cuss a lot, I'm sorry. After I got sober, I became, and I'm going to cuss again, a controlling bitch, because I don't know any other way to say it. I became very, very controlling. I had to control everything, to what he wore to church, to what my kids. I remember somebody telling me that we looked like we stepped out of a JCPenney magazine on the way to church on Sundays. And I remember thinking, you have no idea what we had to go through to look like this. You know, because it was work. And I was a perfectionist, and it was all about what people thought about me, and it was all about ego. And my husband and I, we had acquired the material things, we had acquired all that stuff, but our marriage just went to shit. And it's some bad things that happened, some really bad things that happened, and I got to where I wasn't sleeping at night, and I decided that I would go to the doctor. And so I went to the doctor and I said, I'm not sleeping at night. What can you do to help me? And so he prescribed me sleeping pills. And so I took them as prescribed. I told my sponsor, I told my sponsees, I'm going to meetings, I'm sharing about it, and I'm taking these sleeping pills as prescribed. And then I'm working third shift at this time at a halfway house as a substance abuse counselor. And I remember wanting to take a sleeping pill. It was like 6 o'clock at night. I had to be up at 10 o'clock to go to work. And I remember I couldn't sleep and obsessing over taking that sleeping pill because I couldn't sleep. And I told my husband, I said, something's wrong. We need to throw these away. So he threw them away. And a couple months later, I go to the doctor and I get some more. And I don't tell anybody. And that was I never told anybody. And so I start taking them. And then I throw them away, and then I go get some more, and I throw them away, and then I take some of my friend's sleeping pills. And I did this for about 3 years. In recovery, coming to meetings, working steps, going to church. By this time, I'm a school teacher. Just, not even realizing that I have relapsed. And some people to this day will say it's not a relapse. But for me, it was a relapse. Because it took me to that place, that prison, that self-made prison. And I remember working a step with a sponsee. And in that step, it was talking about, is there something you have not shared with your sponsor? And it clicked. And it said, no, I haven't shared this. So I called her and I told her about what had happened. And she said, yeah, it's a relapse. You got to pick up a white chip. I thought, God. And that was really hard because at this time I had 10 years in the rooms. I was sponsoring a lot of girls. I had arrived, so to say, in my mind. And so that was very, very humbling. And these people, I'm still going to meetings. So, these people are floored. I remember calling one sponsee and telling her about it. She's like, who is this? And I'm like, it's Gretchen. She's like, no. I'm like, yes, this is what happened. And so I pick up a white chip. And I have to say, at that moment, and for probably 2 years after, I was miserable. I had no gratitude. I was caught up in, I've lost my sobriety. My sobriety date's changed. I no longer have the 10 years. Just no gratitude, just miserable. And around this time, we moved to Arizona because I live in Harnett County. And if any of you know anything about Harnett County, it's just not a lot there. It's just a hole in the wall. And so I've always had this dream that I just want to go out west. So God made that possible. We ended up moving out west to Arizona. Everything was in place. We had done a lot of the preparations prior to me admitting that I had had a relapse. And I even thought, well, I could go out there and then just never tell anybody and it would be okay. But I know that it's what I know and it's what God knows. Who gives a shit about what everybody else knows? It doesn't matter. It's between God and myself, my Creator. And so I end up going to Arizona, and that was difficult. Moving in recovery is very, very difficult, especially when you're like me and you want everybody to know you. And so when you walk in a meeting and nobody knows you, that can be pretty humbling. It took me a real long time to click and really get connected, but I just kept going to meetings. I knew the meetings worked. I knew AA was home to me. I knew it was my lifeline. I knew I had to keep going. Without AA, I'm nothing. And I knew that. So I just kept going and I kept going. And then slowly but surely, I started forming some relationships with women. And then I eventually got this sponsor, who is still my sponsor today, who took me through the steps in the big book. I had went through the steps in other ways, but not like she did through the big book. And I remember somebody telling me, I'm so glad you got her as your sponsor because you're going to do the steps and it's going to be amazing. And I thought, she's just taking me through the big book. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that big book changed my life. I'd read the big book. I'd read the stories. I'd read a little bit here and there, but I never really sat down and studied the big book like I should. And when I did that with her, my spirituality, my relationship with God, it just took on to a new level. My service work took on to a new level. My understanding of my disease, all that. And she was a sponsor. She's she's not my friend at all. She tells me like it is. She's very blunt. And she's a lady that makes me want to be a better person. She really is. She is this woman that when I talk to her, I'll do what she tells me to do. I trust her. And she's just such a good person. I want to be like her. And she's like my moral compass. Because I still need that today. Because something will happen and I want to do it shady, or I want to kind of skirt around it, but I have to call her and she'll say, no, you can't do that. She's that voice that says, no, Gretchen, you can't do that. And I am at a point in my recovery where I do go to God first. I was that person that told everybody all my business, and I felt like everybody had to know my problems. And I'd come in AA. I was one of them that would tell everybody everything in AA and just spew it all out there, how I feel, how I'm hurting, blah, blah, blah. And I don't do that today. I go to the God of my understanding, and I let Him do His work, and I sit still. And I don't mess with anything. I just go with the flow. I let God be God, and I stay out of the way. And then I will call her and do what she says do. She might tell me to read a page in the big book. She might tell me to journal. But whatever she does tell me to do, I do it. Because I believe in the process. I believe in being taught. Because I was that person, if you told me to do it, I didn't do it. Rules did not apply to me. I could drive 85, but you had to drive 55. I could cut in line, but you had to wait in line. Something innate in me tells me that I do not have to follow the rules. And I don't know why that is, but still to this day, I will drive around with my tags out of date for several months. And that's not practicing principles, that's not. But I will do that, and that's just the truth. And I'm getting better at that. I'm getting a lot better. I'm showing up on time. If I say I'm going to do it, I do it. I'm that person that shows up. When 18 years ago, I might not show up for 2 or 3 days. And so I got with her and I really, really worked the steps. And around this time, my son is 15, 16, and he starts smoking pot. And that's been kind of difficult for me because I worked the 3rd step and I turned everything over but my children. For some reason, I have a hard time, not now, because God has showed me that He has my son in the palm of His hand. I have no doubt. But there was a time that I thought I knew a little bit better than God. I had to manipulate everything. I had to fix my son. I had to make sure he was happy. I had to make sure that he had everything he needed and that he was happy and that life was good, because my fear was he would become like his father and I. And his father, I have to say, was murdered. 15 years ago? 15 years ago. He never got clean. He never got sober. And he was murdered over a drug deal. And my brother died as well as a direct result of this disease. I didn't mention that either. But my fear was he would end up like him or his father. That was my biggest fear. And so even when he was young, I always tried to make sure life was good. I always had him talk about his feelings. How do you feel? Let's do this, let's do that. And he did some things. He's done some illegal things. He stole my van one night, and you know what I did? I called the police. He took my bank card. I called the police. I kicked him out of the house. He walked through my house one day and acted like he was the head of the house, and I told him to get his shit and go. And he left my house in a pink book bag that my daughter had given him with just a little bit of stuff, because I was not going to enable him. I was not going to allow him to act like that in my house. And he has smoked pot in my house, and my husband has whooped his ass. And he said, why'd you let him do that? And I said, because I would do it if I could. We've laid down the law. We do not let his choices affect us at all. He has turned out, he's graduating. I never thought that would happen. His girlfriend is homecoming queen, class president, a really nice girl. Don't ask me how that happened. But just an amazing girl. He went to the prom. He graduated. He was able to pass the urinalysis and join the Army, so he leaves. And I remember there was a time when everything was going on with him, I was counting the days. God, I just want him out of my house. Now I'm counting the days before he leaves because I want him in my house. Because even though he still smokes pot, I know that he does, even though that is the choice he's making, I've somehow allowed, that's him, We still have a relationship. I don't give him money. I don't give him rides, but we still have somewhat of a good relationship. And I tell him like it is, and he respects that. And that day that I kicked him out, he ended up coming. I kicked him out on a Thursday. He went to school Friday and came home Friday night. And I was thinking, if it was me, I would have rolled all weekend. I sure wouldn't have come home Friday night. But he came home Friday night begging to come back home, and we said, well, yeah, but there's going to be some changes. And he has changed. I mean, he doesn't walk around he's very humbled. He walks around my house, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And so I have 2 daughters, and they're perfect. I tell you, God has really, really blessed me with my children. My marriage still has its ups and downs, but I truly believe that if I keep God first and if I work on me. See, now I'm at my spot. You have to look at you. You have to work on you. It's all about looking at my side of the street and what can I do to be the best wife. Not what he can do to be the best husband, but what can I do to be the very best wife. Not what he can do. And it's all about me and what am I doing. And so that's kind of how I try to go about in my marriage. And life today, there's really no big deals. Nothing really shakes me. Nothing really is overwhelming. I've gotten to the point where I just kind of go with the flow. If it happens, I make the very best of it. I got bed bugs. And that is like traumatic. Yes. And I probably can't believe I shared that, can you? But I did. I'm a teacher, and I let this little girl come to my house because I'm of service, and this little girl, so we end up getting bed bugs. And you know what? It's okay. It's not a big deal. $2,000 later, after Terminex comes, and I'm talking about some work. But you know what? It's not a big deal. You know, it's not a big deal at all. My husband and I handled it. We did what we had to do. That day, we had to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and leave, and we couldn't come back till like 9 o'clock that night because they heat the whole house and they do all this stuff. And so my son and my 2 daughters and my husband and I, we just left, and we had the best family time. We just went to Chapel Hill, we went to a meeting, and we went to the botanical gardens, and we went and ate, and we just hung out as a family, and we made some memories. And this past weekend, we went camping. I took 6 kids camping, and my dog, and my husband who hates my dog, and that was stressful because he says I love the dog more than him, which sometimes I do. But, you know, it was great. You know, it was nothing really is a big a deal any day these days. I'm just so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous and practicing what my sponsor and you guys have taught me. Because when I came in here, I didn't know how to do anything. I really didn't. And it's only through AA that I'm able to be a productive member of society. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And I think I'm done. Thanks for letting me share.